The question from the YouTube channel was, what is the interplay between government and corporations that really make this so devastating? You said the government kind of stands behind the I guess the corporate empire, so to speak.
Well, yeah, that's an essential question, and it's a long one, and I go into great detail in the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So, any interested reader, take a good look at the tremendous interlocking system of government and corporations. And what we just talked about, and so there's a lot in the book about that, many chapters, including the new economic hitmen that work for the big corporations here in the United States, the jackals that are using violence or threaten violence, and all kinds of manner of spying techniques on us, drones and everything else that we know about in the United States today, in Europe. There's a lot in the book about that. But to kind of give a short version, what we just talked about with the trade agreements is a good example that our government is supporting these trade agreements that are totally skewed toward big corporations. And I think we have to recognize that this revolving door policy is a highway to corruption. So when we have people that can run a big oil company, for example, and then go to Washington to be in charge of the body that oversees oil corporations, writes the rules for oil corporations, and then go back to work for oil corporations after 2 or 3 years in government, that's corruption. That just sets the stage for corruption. This whole revolving door thing. And we have to recognize that our politicians, so many of them, when they leave office, if they lose their next election or they decide not to run, they're going to get incredibly lucrative jobs as lobbyists or consultants for corporations, and they know that while they're in the office, so they tend to serve those corporations. It's human nature, It's a very hard thing to fight against, except by changing the laws to, for example, to make sure that when somebody leaves public office, they cannot go to work in an industry that they've been regulating or overseeing for at least 5 years.
Hmm. Let me ask you this. Recently, the actual line that people have used to say that that isn't corruption is they say you can't actually prove any kind of quid pro pro. They say stuff like you can't say that the money that they get in campaign contributions actually influences them because there's no evidence, or you can't read inside somebody's mind, or you didn't catch them at a diner exchanging briefcases of money, so you can't prove corruption. What would you say to that?
True. Can't prove it, probably. And it's legal, so it actually isn't corruption. These corporations aren't doing anything illegal by offering people jobs. But let's say, Nick, that, I come to you and I say, hey, Nick, hey, I really want to support you. You've got this project that you're working on. You're trying to develop something someplace, and I'm going to give you a couple of $1 million to help you develop it. And you've got this great radio show that you're doing, and I want you to promote me on that radio show. You can make me look good. And incidentally, if your radio show fails or you decide to get off there, I'm going to give you a job as a consultant at $500,000 a year to work for me. Put me on your show once every month or so, or put someone on that makes me look good. And I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm just asking you, I've got some people out there that are dissing me. Promote my book a little bit, make me look good. What are you going to do, Nick, probably? I mean, and it may be that you actually believe in my book anyway, and so you're not really doing anything that lacks integrity, but it's very, very questionable. And I go into detail on some specific examples in the book, and one of them I would mention is Senator Dodd of Connecticut. I liked Senator Dodd. I'm from New England. I'm from New Hampshire. I thought he was a cool guy. He was in the Senate for about 20 years. But I later found out that he was head of the Senate Finance Committee, and while he was in that position, he also ran for president and accepted huge amounts of money from the finance industry. He was head of the Senate Banking Committee. He accepted huge amounts of money from financial services organizations. It wasn't illegal, but I would call that very, very sketchy. If you're Senator God, and you're accepting all this money, and the same people that are giving you the money are coming to you and saying, hey, like we don't really like this law that's being suggested that restricts the finance industry, and you're accepting this money from these people. It's going to be pretty damned hard for you not to listen to them very carefully, whereas you might not even open the door to someone who represented the other side.
I think that is an interesting point. Like what you said was it's not illegal, and I think at a certain point we have to realize that it's not so much what they're doing is illegal. We're not trying to send them to prison. We're not trying to prove something beyond, you know, whatever the burden of proof is to actually, for a criminal act to send somebody to prison, right? This is the court of public opinion, and that is totally separate from the legal word corruption.
Well, I think,
So,
yeah, and I also think we should change the rules. I think someone who's head of the Senate banking committee should not be able. I think it should be illegal for him to accept money from the banking industry, from the financial services group. Well, of course, if we had the movement to amend, if we actually reform the Constitution to get big business and big money out of the electoral process, that would solve that problem anyway. And that would be a big step. And of course, there's a huge movement in this country now to make that happen, which I totally support. That would have a big impact on the very things that we're talking about. It should be illegal for people to accept money when they're in a position to have control over those industries. It's not illegal now, but it should be.
okay. And the point I would just want to add on to that is I agree with you 100%. The rules should be changed, but when we're judging politicians, we shouldn't be concerned only with the legality, because we know that the legal system in this instance is not proper. It's actually not working well, right? How are we going to judge them with the legal system when we know it's not equipped to deal with the situation? But yet
Right,
we're still using that like it's some sort of acceptable metric. But I,
right.
I really do 100% agree with him.